This is my Gateway 2000 Pentium Pro. I got this machine at a ham fest about 7 years ago now, I believe. And the reason I got it was because of this right here, this 5 1/4 inch floppy drive. Now, I was attracted to this machine because at the time, when I was in high school or so, I did not have a computer with a working 5 1/4 inch floppy drive. And I had some old, I think, compact, portable 286 base machine that used these, and I wanted the ability to write software to them to use on that machine. So when I saw this, the whole computer, which included a mouse, monitor, and keyboard, was priced at about $20 for the whole set. I offered 10 and the seller accepted 15. And I think that was a great deal because these drives alone can go for more than that, at least from what I've seen on eBay. Along with that 5 1/4 inch floppy drive, which is not original to the machine, as you may be able to tell by the different colored faceplates, is an optical drive. Now, originally this machine had a 12x CD-ROM drive. I went ahead and replaced it with this HP CD burner right here. I don't know what exact speed this is, and it doesn't really matter because this machine has a Pentium Pro processor clocked at 200 megahertz, and it can't really handle writing CDs at anything more than one or two speed, because then you run the risk of buffer underwrites, which basically makes your CDs unreadable when that happens, and basically all it's good for is using it for a coaster, which is why if you hear somebody say the term, well, I just burned a coaster on my CD-ROM drive, that's what that term meant. Also, we have a 3.5 inch floppy drive, which is original machine and works just fine. All of the drives work fine in this machine now, thankfully. We have a reset button, the power button, and the G6200 nameplate. Now, one thing I really like about these old computers is it's really easy, even if we didn't have the Pentium Pro sticker down here, you can tell exactly what type and what speed the processor is. So for this, we have G6, which means it's a P6 based machine, because you had Pentium class machines that were something like either G5 or P5, depending on what machine you had. The dash, and then the processor speed. In this case, it's 200 megahertz. So even if you're missing stickers or if it's in rough shape, you can pretty easily tell what processor Gateway computers and several other manufacturers had at that particular time. Turning around the machine here, we can see, well, if I turn it sideways here, we can see our serial number, including the manufacturing date, right down to the very date, December 17th of 1996. This power supply, I think it's something around a 200 watt unit, if I'm not mistaken. And then if we move down here to the I/O ports on the motherboard, it's pretty sparse except for some handwriting that the previous owner added to label the keyboard and mouse ports. So we have our PS2 ports, a couple of serial ports, and a parallel port. That's it. So there's no way for you to connect any USB peripherals or connect it to the internet or do much else unless you have like a printer or a serial mouse to, or a null modem cable to connect it to another computer. that is where our expansion slots come in. Now, computers today, at least the computers that I see, are mainly geared towards gaming if they're desktops, and usually the most important expansion card these days is the graphics card, and they can be absolutely massive, taking up 2 or even 3 slots with the newest enthusiast class cards. But back in these days, expansion slots were a lot more valuable and more plentiful as well, because this has, I think, 7 internally. The original, like, IBM XTs and ATs had as many as 8, I believe, but this still had a full card of expansion slots. So I have added a couple. I added a USB 2.0 card here. I think it has an NEC chipset in it. It has an S3 video card. I don't think it's anything like a Verge. I think it's just a, like, Trio 64 of some kind. And then we have a 10100 network card here that I added because I do like connecting this machine to the internet sometimes to see what Internet Explorer 5 can do, which I'll show you later in the video. And then these 2 cards are ISA cards, which are original to the machine. Right here we have the dial-up modem, which looks like it's a 33.6 modem, and a sound card, which I will show you more of once I take this machine apart. It just requires 8 screws, 4 on each side, that I need to undo, and I'm going to stop the camera to do that because it's really a 2-hand job to get this cover off. Okay, so the slide cover just slides off of the case, and now we can see the internals of the computer. And it looks like I was wrong about the size of the power supply. It's a 145 watt unit made by Aztec Custom Power. But if we move down here, if you can forgive the poor lighting conditions, you can see the Intel Pentium Pro processor with its massive heatsink and a cooling fan right next to it to bring air into the power supply, but it's not necessarily mounted on the CPU heatsink itself. Now, this is a design that I've seen with CPUs up from about the Pentium 1 all the way up to the Pentium 4 era. I'm not sure if CPUs just got too hot to where they needed more localized cooling, but I do think that it was a rather efficient design, because usually power supplies have their own fans and then you have your own separate CPU fan. So nowadays you need to have like 2 fans to do what you used to be able to do with 1. While it's possible that the fans may fail earlier, it certainly does help keep the more expensive components, the CPU and the power supply, cooler. Moving down here, we can see 4 72-pin SIM memory slots. Now, I think the machine came with 64 megabytes of RAM from the factory, and then I added another 32 just because I happen to have a couple SIMs lying around to make a 32 megabyte kit. If you can see that through the ribbon cables, we have an Intel, I think it's a 440 chipset. Maybe actually we can see that one down there a little bit better. I'm not sure. Maybe that's not a 440, or maybe I'm just looking at the wrong chip. It's been a while since I've looked at the manual for this motherboard. It is just a generic Intel motherboard that Gateway used in this computer. I have noticed that Gateway has used like just off-the-shelf Intel motherboards in their computers, so even if you cannot find drivers or BIOS updates, you can oftentimes search for the motherboard name, and then you can find whatever you may happen to need that way. Moving down here to the expansion slots, you can see the USB expansion card, the S3 graphics card, and our network card, along with the original gateway, what looks like a hardware modem, so that's definitely interesting to see, and an Ensoniq Soundscape Vivo sound card. Now, if I recall correctly, this is a Wavetable synthesizer sound card that I'm not sure if it's the Sound Blaster standard. I think it might actually be its own standard, but I don't really care for it that much, to be honest, mainly because you can't find drivers for it past Windows 98 last time I checked. And if you put enough RAM in this thing, I definitely think it would be capable of running Windows 2000, which is something I would like to explore doing with this machine. Although I already have a couple of other computers I think would be better suited to run Windows 2000, it would be interesting to see, but I digress. Over here we have the hard drive. This is a 10 gigabyte hard drive that I just got. This was actually part of a box of hard drives I got for free a few years later at the same Hamfest I got this computer at. I think originally it had a 3.6 gigabyte hard drive. That I still have that drive. It still works, but I just wanted something more so I can load as many games and programs on it as I would like without having to run out of hard drive space. And this computer does not have a problem booting from this drive, so it does not look like it is impacted by the 8.4 gigabyte hard drive size limitation for its boot drive, at least with the latest BIOS update for it. So that is definitely welcome to have. We have the CMOS battery down there, which it was dead when I got it, which was not very surprising, so I replaced that, and pretty much immediately after I got it, it still works fine to this day, so that's definitely good to see. We have some, I think this is actually the BIOS chip down here, this Intel Flash. From what I can tell, this was one of the first motherboards to really have a flashable BIOS instead of just a ROM that you'd have to use a chip puller to take out and insert an updated one in order to update the BIOS, which, yes, that's how you had to do it back then. Maybe if I turn the camera around, maybe we can see if it'll focus, if we can find a date code. Nope, it just says 92, 96, so I think those are just copyright dates. Alright, so next I think we'll hook this machine up and see what it does when we turn it on. Okay, now I have the computer hooked up. I think I actually have it hooked up to the monitor and the mouse that I got the computer with. I know this monitor was, and I think the mouse was too. The keyboard is just one that I had lying around and out, and it's just what I'm using. The keyboard I got with this computer was nothing special. It's just some rubber dome mushboard. But without further ado, let's go ahead and power it on. This will take a little bit of time to boot up. It has 98 megabytes of RAM in it. I think I said that before, but unfortunately it doesn't do much of a seek test for the floppy drives either, so it goes pretty quickly. I have Windows 98 on here. Now, like I said, This computer may be better optimized for Windows NT4 and 32-bit applications, but one of the intended uses of this computer and for me is to play some games on it, and Windows 98 definitely lends itself to doing that better than NT4 does. But it takes a little while to boot up, but it's not bad at all by any means. Now, one thing I have been playing around with recently is the ProtoWeb project. Now, the ProtoWeb project is something that vintage computer enthusiasts have set up so you can access the internet on period correct web pages for what old hardware you're trying to access this on. I suppose it could probably work if you wanted to use modern hardware as well, because if you go into the proxy server settings here, it just sets the address to wayback.protoweb.org, port 7851. But this is designed to be used for accessing the old internet on older computers. So, for example, if we went to Microsoft.com, we would get what Microsoft.com looked like in, well, I guess the year 2000 right there, since we can see with the front page featuring Windows 2000 Data Center Server. And you can just click around. I'm not sure how functional it is or how easy it is to break it. Like if you wanted to go to a see like this, I knew this wasn't going to be perfect, but it does look like it is at least functional on a pretty high level, at least from what I have seen. The main website though is inno.com, and then this is kind of like the main hub for the project, that you can see the web pages that have been restored, and as well as some FTP servers as well. I guess they're FTP sites. So let's see, what is this? I don't think I've been in here too much, so we can take a look. I assume we should probably go to Win32. Yeah. Did I lock up the computer? Nope, there we go. Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. All right, let's see, what do we have? We have Daemon Tools, DirectX, the Windows 98 USB storage driver. That's handy. Opera. This is pretty handy, though, I will say, because I remember when I was collecting, when I first got started collecting old hardware like this in the 2010s, there was nothing like this that you could just access on an old computer, except for maybe like old apps, I think it was, and it was towards the latter half of the 2010s. It was basically just you had to access it on a modern computer, download the programs, and then transfer it across, because the old versions of Internet Explorer and Firefox that ran on Windows 98 were just becoming too non-functional to really be able to access on the hardware directly. So it's really cool that they're making at least a moderate effort to make, I guess, technically an interactive museum featuring the internet browsable again. And I feel like this is still in its infancy. I do feel like this is just going to continue to grow and improve in functionality. But you can also like see the list of websites that have been restored. Like, for example, we have IBM.com. Doesn't look like Gateway's website is archived though. Let's go to Hamsterdams.com. Why not? Let's see how that looks. Now, are we gonna get the song? Yep. Alright, that's enough of that. I wonder if that page is even designed to run on like a display this large, because I think a lot of people would have still been using a 640 by 480 display, and this is running at 1024 by 768, and it actually does look like I have an S3 Verge in this computer. So I was wrong before. I have an S3 Verge VX, so it does look like I can do some 3D acceleration, although it was more of like 3D deceleration from what I've heard, because the performance was not all that great. I'm assuming though that if I want to go higher than 1024 by 768, yeah, I'm gonna need a video memory upgrade. So I'm assuming that, oh, it didn't take it back to 1024 by 768, so maybe it actually is supported. Let's find out. Huh, well, it looks like it actually might have worked. Okay, cool. This can support 1280 by 1024 in TrueBit color. That's certainly a happy little accident to discover. So, I've been browsing around a little bit, and I found an old CNET page with a review on this computer. So, let's see, if we look here, apparently this computer cost $3,548 when it was new. So that would have been quite the pretty penny. Let's see, what else did they have to say here? Oh, it actually, their review system apparently was using a SCSI hard drive with a Matrox Millennium video card and a Sound Blaster 16. This might be an older model, or it might just be a incredibly well optioned review sample to get the maximum performance. So it's possible that this might have cost significantly less than $3,500 back in the day. And this just happens to be like the top of the line, no holds barred budget model Pentium Pro computer. And you can also see here the large yellow space to the right. Like I was saying earlier, I don't think these web pages were made with people using 1280 by 1024 monitors in mind. Like I said, a lot of people are probably still using monitors that they were running in 640 by 480 or 800 by 600 mode. But anyway, that's about all I have to say about this computer. So thank you very much for watching, and feel free to leave a comment if you have one.